Today's presentation is malware automation, and I have Christopher Elisan with me. He's a principal engineer and malware scientist from RSA. He's also the author of Malware Rootkits and Botnets, Beginner's Guide. He's a seasoned reverse engineer and malware researcher, as I mentioned before. Elisan is one of the pioneers of Micro's TrendLabs, where he led multiple technical and managerial positions. Then after Trend, he led and established F-Secure's Asia R&D, where he spearheaded multiple research projects as well. Then he joined Damballa, where he specialized in malware research, analysis, and reverse engineering. He frequently speaks at various security conferences, and we were very fortunate to have him at BSides Raleigh this year. And without any further ado, I pass it on to you, Chris.
All right, thank you, Omar. Thank you for the introduction. Today we're going to discuss malware automation. So who am I? So currently I'm the principal malware scientist at RSA. And as Omar mentioned, I'm also the author of Malware Rootkits and Botnets, a beginner's guide. Please get a copy of the book. All proceeds of the book go straight to my two kids' 529 college fund. So please get a copy if you have a budget for a book this year. And before joining RSA, I was with Damballa for 3 years, and then I was with F-Secure for 3 years. They actually hired me to build their Asia R&D in Kuala Lumpur. And before that, I was with Trend Micro for 8 years. Trend Micro is where I started my career. And you could follow me at Twitter, Tops. You could send me a message, ask me questions, anything that has to do with malware, cyber threats, cybercrime, or anything. Please feel free to send me messages in Twitter. And if you want to read my blogs in RSA, you can do so by following the link bit.ly Tops blog. In RSA, I'm part of the RSA FirstWatch. I lead the malware intelligence team in RSA FirstWatch. So we're a threat intelligence team. We're actually made up of experienced people in the industry. And they always refer to us as the G.I. Joe of threat research. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, our Twitter account is RSA FirstWatch. And if you guys want to read our blogs, the team's blogs, just go to blogs.rsa.com. All right. Now to the most important part of the presentation, the talk itself. So before we begin, the purpose of the talk is actually for me to give you an over-the-shoulder view of how attackers produce the staggering amount of, and for us to have that understanding, we would be discussing first the current state of malware, the attacker's arsenal, the creation process of an army of armored malware, and then I will also discuss the advantages of automation. And I'm going to show you a demo how malware is being created in an automated fashion. All right, so the current state of malware. The chart in front of you right now, it's actually updated as of 10/05/2013. And from here, the year-on-year number of malware, it's really staggering. So just comparing, we're only in October, but comparing to the number of unique malware that has been seen in 2012, there's 60 million more that has been discovered. But then we need to be wary of this kinds of chart. Although it shows unique number of malware, the way they define uniqueness here is different. For them, uniqueness here is per hash. So let's say you have a malware file, you add 1 byte at the end of it, take a hash of that malware file, and then when in fact it's not. So be wary of that fact that they define this. That's how they define uniqueness when it comes to this chart. And also, this only represents malware that has been discovered. It doesn't account for the number of malware that hasn't been discovered yet. One of my friends in the industry actually estimates that multiply all of those that has been discovered by 4, and that's the number of malware that hasn't been discovered yet. And then before, when attackers do an attack campaign, or there's an outbreak, usually they only use one malware. So usually the attack revolves around the malware itself. That's why they call it a malware outbreak. Like I Love You virus, the Melissa virus, SQL Slammer, MyDoom, all of those attacks only came from one malware. So it's very easy to stop, really. You just get a sample of that malware, create a solution for it, deploy that solution, and you eventually stop the attack. But right now, it's totally different. Right now, attackers use an army of armored malware. So they use multiple families to conduct their campaign of attack. So the advantage of this is that if you stop one malware family, other families actually take over, making the attack persistent. And here, the malware is not the center of the attack anymore. The malware is just a tool of the attack. So attackers use malware depending on their capability. So their main concern in choosing the malware families for their attack is its capability. If it has the capability they need, then they will use that malware. So how are they able to create an army of armored malware? So they have different tools in their arsenal. So among those tools are the DIY kits, the armoring tools, the packers, encryptors, joiners, and binders. And they also have AV scanners for quality assurance purposes, which I will explain later how they use it. So going to DIY kits. When I first started my career, this is the first DIY kit that I actually came across. So this one is called VCL, Virus Creation Laboratory. It was created in 1992 by a 15-year-old kid from Chicago. So this kit was really special because before, if you need to create a malware, you need to have assembly language skills. But ever since this kit came out, you have the capability to create malware without any programming skills. You just need to know the command line, and you'll be able to create your own malware. And then another group which calls themselves PSMPC or PS, Falcon Schism, produced their own DIY kit, which they called MPC or Mass Produced Code Generator. It's the same concept as VCL. All you need to know is the command line, and you could create your own malware copy. So as you can see here, most of the kits that were seen before, or the early kits during the heyday of the DOS viruses, they're more of a pissing contest. It's like saying, I'm more technically knowledgeable than you, or I have more technical skills than you, therefore my kit is better than your kit. But fast forward 10, 15 years, we get kits like SpyEye and Zeus. And these two kits are actually now used for cybercrime. They're used to steal online financial credentials. So the main difference between these two sets of kits, the kits we see today and the kits of yesteryears, is that number one, most of the kits before, they were used for, as I said, it's like a pissing contest. But the kits today, they're more geared towards cybercrime. And another difference that you need to take away from this presentation is that the DIY kits before, like the VCL and the PSMPC, they only produce a finite amount of malware samples. But the kits of today, like SpyEye and Zeus, they can virtually create infinite amount of malware samples. When I say infinite, it's because they use time as a seed. So as long as time exists, they will create a unique malware sample. And when I say unique here, I don't mean unique in terms of hash. I mean here it's like a polymorphic, metamorphic, unique. It's totally, each generation looks different on disk and also in memory. So that's how uniqueness is defined when it comes to these kits. And most of these kits that I've shown you, they already have protective mechanisms built in. So they already encrypt the malware they're creating. and there are already some built-in protective mechanisms. But of course, the attackers, they don't just rely on those protective mechanisms offered by the DIY kits. So they also use standalone armoring tools like this one, UPX, free UPX. These are all packers. So the purpose of having a packer is that it does not only encrypt, it also compresses the sample or the malware creation of the attackers. So it makes it really hard for reversers to actually analyze and reverse and create any kinds of signatures from those binaries. Another of those armoring tools, they also have other features built into them, like this one, the PFECX GUI. This one has additional options. It says here compress resources, compress icons, anti-debugger crack, encrypt executable, and other options. Now, some of these we have to understand that some of these options really work, but some of these options do not. So some of the options that I've tested, instead of them really doing what they're claiming to do, they just put in garbage of code into the binary, and then that's it. But then people, especially script kiddies, every time they see this, they would grab at the chance to get this tool. And in the underground, you can sell this for like $10, $15 a pop. So if you could have 1,000 people believe that all of these features actually work, then that's $10,000 for the attackers who are selling these kinds of tools. But then again, some of these options really work. And when they work, it really gives the security products and the researchers a hard time analyzing the malware. So when it comes to armoring tools, it's also, some of them are also a service offered in the cloud, like this one, indetectables.net. When I was doing my research before, this was free. So you could actually submit a file here, and then that file would be returned to you encrypted already. But then after a while, when they became very popular in the underground, the creator of this service started charging 10 to 15 euros to get access to the website. So for you to get access to the website, you need to buy an access code or a license key that you need to input every time you open the site so you could have access to the site. Now, of course, with this armoring tool, you're actually being victimized in three ways. I say that because I really don't trust who owns this website. So you're victimized in three ways. One, whatever you submit to them, of course, they get to keep it. Nothing is preventing them from deleting it from their servers. And number two, you just gave them your credit card number and any other information that they ask from you, so they have that already with them. And number three, they just charge you 10 to 15 euros for you to access their website. And in the underground, you could actually sell malware samples for as low as 1 cent a piece to $1, depending on the sophistication of the malware samples. So if this site could get like thousands and thousands of samples a day that are unique, they could sell those to, let's say, 1 cent. That's a lot of money for them if they keep on collecting thousands and thousands of samples on a daily basis. So aside from those tools that I've mentioned, another type of armoring tool that is very popular is called a file joiner and an exe bundler. So although they differ in name, they're actually the same when it comes to concept. So the main concept here is that you get a binary file or your malicious file, and then you get a popular file, and then you can join them together. Now, this armoring tool, I always term it as the infection routine made into a tool. Before, during the DOS days, when everything was called the virus, the infection routine is built into the virus. So if it ever infects a file that is very popular, somebody would copy that file, put it on a diskette, and then put it in their own system, and then run that file. Because it's very popular, people tend to copy it. and then the other systems that would have a copy of that file and execute it in their system would become infected. So it's the same concept here. Like most malware today, or I would say almost all, they don't have any infection routine whatsoever. Anyway, they're not really, their main concern is spreading through the network, not really spreading within the compromised system already. Now, this tool is usually used when it comes to deploying malware. So what the attackers do is that they would get a very popular file or a very popular application and then bundle their malware creation with that very popular application. And then they can post it to whatever software sharing website or software download site, free software download site. Or they can even share it using peer-to-peer file sharing programs. Now, when this became popular, what software publishers did is that every time they publish their software for download, they would also publish the hash of the software. This ensures that what the user is downloading is really the software that the software publishes. Of course, if that website is not secure enough, the attackers can always break into that website and then change the hash to reflect the hash of their creation plus the very popular file that they just compromised using the file joiner and the exe bundler tool. So these two tools, even though they're different, it's the same concept, the same modules, the same outcome. Malware plus popular file equals enticing file that everybody would be downloading, or the chances of it being downloaded and executed becomes really high because it's a very enticing file. So AV scanners. So AV scanners, they're more used for quality assurance purposes, which I will explain later when we go into the process of automating malware. So one of the very popular AV scanner tool is the multi-AV scan. So this one, it actually combines all the engines of different antivirus solutions into one tool, so that you could just submit a file here or scan this, use this to scan a file, and then it would tell you whether that file is malicious, is detected or not. So now this tool is very convenient because most AV products, they conflict with each other because they use the same, or they need the same permission or access level privilege in the host system as other AV companies or other AV products. Now with this tool, it makes sure that that conflict doesn't exist anymore. But then again, the way they do it, sometimes they strip each of the antivirus engines also the capability to do dynamic and heuristic scanning. So when you look at it technically, it will work in a way because it still has static scanning, but the most important feature, the dynamic scanning and heuristic scanning, is virtually killed. But of course, if the attack group is well funded, nothing is preventing them to have multiple virtual images, and all of those virtual images would contain different AV products that they want to evade. And if they're really, really well funded, they even have access to network security appliances or whatever security appliances that their target entity is using. So let's say you're not able to get a copy of multi-AV scan. So most attackers would actually use online AV scanners like VirusTotal, VirScan, and NoVirusTanks. But the most popular that I've seen so far is NoVirusTanks because it has the option that says do not distribute the sample. But then again, even if you tick this box, there's no way of saying whether NoVirusTanks is really not submitting it to AV vendors. But then again, most attackers actually, they really don't care, especially if their attack is more of a hit and run. When I say hit and run, they just need to be in the system for a short period of time, and then that's it. They don't need anything else. Now, they understand because AV companies or security vendors, they receive tens and tens of thousands of samples a day. And samples that are received coming from these sources like VirusTotal and NoVirusTanks, or from whatever free sources, they get into the bottom of the queue. Because with those, let's say you receive like 60,000 samples a day, some automated systems will not be able to process all of those in one day, and it's virtually or I would say it's impossible for a team of 5 analyst researchers to actually go through all of those samples by eye. So the AV companies or the security companies, they work on prioritization. They handle samples first that are submitted from high-paying customers, and then the next high-paying customer, and then the one that ends up at the bottom of the queue is actually those samples that come from free sources. So because of this reality, attackers still take advantage of these tools. They really don't care whether it gets submitted or not. Anyway, they say hey, it will take them days or even months to even handle that. And there are some cases wherein a big enterprise would be compromised, and then there would be a press coverage about it, and then AV vendors would look at their sample collection, then they will find out, hey, that sample that actually infected this Fortune 100 company, we have it in our collection the past week. So that reality exists. All right, so let's go to the process. So you have a malware produced by the DIY kit. Then you just subject them to different standalone armoring tools. You can use encryptor, real-time packers, exe binders, and other armoring tools. And you could actually use them as many times as you want, or you could change the order, and it will totally mess up security products and also non-experienced researchers. And then once you have all of those, you submit it to your quality assurance process, which is an in-the-cloud AV or on-premise AV, network security appliance, or whatever. And then if it passes the quality assurance, let's say it's not detected by any security product that your target is using, then you're good. Now you have yourself an army of armored malware. Now let's say you don't have money to buy DIY kit, or the attacker group is not well funded. Like for example, the Carburp generator, when it was first available, the reported amount of it was 40 grand a pop. But then after it was released, it's virtually worth nothing. So that's how expensive most DIY kits are. So if you don't have that money, you could always use old malware. And old malware, once you subject them to different standalone armoring tools, they became new again, and then they become undetected again. So actually, this served as the inspiration for a previous talk that I had a couple of years ago, which I called the green malware, made from 100% recycled malware. Because when I was in my previous adventures, one client actually approached me and said, "We just been hacked, or a malware just infected our system. It's a very sophisticated malware." Anyway, usually most companies term something sophisticated if it passes through their defenses. So after spending weeks, months taking out all of the protection, I found out that malware is 5 years old, 10 years old. So the reality exists that malware or attackers actually don't care whether a malware is old and new, as long as it has that capability that they need. All they need to do is just subject it to different standalone armoring tools, and it will become undetected again. It can bypass different security products, different security appliances, and then they could actually release it again or use it in their campaign of attack. All right, what are the advantages of automation? So exponential effect, strength in numbers. The more you have, the better you are. And when it comes to updating malware, it's quite easy. And of course, to knock a exponential effect. So first, you start with a malware DIY kit. So as I mentioned earlier, with the malware DIY kit, you could create infinite amount of malware samples, especially if it uses time as a seed. So from there, you could create one malware sample up to infinity, and just take one sample of that, subject it into an armoring tool, and some armoring tools also use time as a seed. So just from one sample, it could also create an infinite generation, unique generation of that malware sample. So just from one sample, you could create one, two, and so on, and just get one sample, subject into another armoring tool, and as I said, you could mix and match just to actually fool the researchers and also different security products, subject them into different armoring tools, and so on and so forth. Plus, if you don't want to use this, or if attackers don't want to use this in an attack, they could always sell these samples in the underground. Like, let's say if they could generate 1 million samples a day, which is very possible, and sell that for 1 cent a pop in the underground, that's a lot of money for them. So when it comes to easy malware update, unique samples per malware deployment technology. You could have unique malware samples. So what's a malware deployment technology? So a malware deployment technology, that's the technology used by the attackers to have their malware creation reach the target. Just reach the target, not really have it execute on the target, but just reach the target. So what are samples of malware deployment technology? So a USB stick is an example. Somebody might be standing in front of your office giving out free USB sticks because they're saying it's a promotion for something. You get one of those USB sticks, then you plug it into a PC, and then the next thing you know, you get infected. So that USB stick is the deployment technology. So another deployment technology is email. So most malware comes through email. So that's one deployment technology. Another deployment technology are drive-by download sites. So those are different kinds of malware deployment technology. Now, let's say we use email as an example. Let's say I have a botnet enterprise that has 50. Now, I would tell my botnet, create 50 spams targeting each one of these employees, and each of the email will contain one unique malware sample. Now, let's say that email was received by somebody who's tech savvy in the company, engineer, and he says, "Oh, this is obviously a malware, so I'm going to send it to our security provider, analyze and provide a solution." And let's say the next day, or probably in a couple of hours, that company gets the solution from the AV company. So they deploy the solution. So he tells his CTO, "We're covered, we're protected. I was able to collect the email with the malware. I have the solution. I've deployed the solution, so we're good." But then the next day, the sysad would say, "Hey, I thought we're covered. How come, based on my log, we're having some infections within the company?" And then that happens because the reality is, the sample that was caught by the security engineer, you will never see that sample ever again. It only covered that sample that he received. It didn't cover the 49 samples that were sent to the other employees of the company. Now, let's say one of those 49 was able to reach somebody who's not really that technical savvy, and that somebody was aptly gullible enough to believe the email, execute the sample, and do whatever the malware or the email told him or her to do. So the company ends up being infected even though a solution was deployed. That's because the solution that was deployed only covered one sample. It didn't cover the other 49 samples. That's why, like for me, I don't really believe in hashes when it comes to identifying malware. Like people would say, "Hey, I've analyzed this malware. This is this family, and these are the hashes." Because chances are that one sample, you wouldn't see it ever again. You would only see it at that one instance. And also when it comes to updating malware, malware serving domains can rotate malware in minutes. So let's go back to the example. So you got infected, right? Or the enterprise got infected by the malware. So they started calling an incident responder to actually go to that computer and try to extract the malware sample. Now, before we continue with that example, I would like to explain first what a malware serving domain is. So a botnet actually utilizes three network resources. One is the CNC, which is very well documented. It's the channel that actually influences the way the malware behave in the system. And the other one is the domain drop zone, where all of the stolen information is being dropped, especially if the attack is an information stealing attack. And the malware serving domain, that's a network resource that actually contains the different configuration files, update files, different malware components. That's where all of those files are located. Now, this network resources can be one, like one domain could be a combination of all of them, or they could be separate, three separate domains. So let's go back to the example. So let's say the company called an incident responder. That incident responder was able to get the malware that was infecting that system. And then after half a day or after a day, the company or the security company provided a solution based on that malware that was extracted by the incident responder. So they have again a belief that they're okay, they're protected. But then the next day, the sysad would say, hey, how come I still see in my logs that there is still data being exfiltrated out of our company? When in fact, we've already deployed the solution company-wide. That happens because the reality is malware or the attackers have the capability to update that malware in an instant. They could even send it, actually set it to update every hour, or if they want to be much more quiet, every 24 hours or on a specific time, let's say every 3 p.m. or every 3 a.m. So it's up to the attackers. So what usually happens is whatever that malware that was extracted by the incident responder, that malware no longer exists anywhere in the computers of that enterprise because the attackers already updated the malware that was compromising the system. So they just wasted half a day or even a day deploying a solution when in fact they're deploying a solution for something that doesn't exist in the system already. And of course, the obvious effect of automation, it renders security products useless. So when it comes to malware creation time versus solution cycle time, the attackers clearly have the edge. So as you will see in the demo later, it just takes seconds to create a unique malware. Again, the way I define unique here is that it's like a metamorphic unique. It's unique on disk and it's unique in memory. And solution cycle time, when I was in Trend Micro, the fastest was 2 hours. So let's say everybody has that capability, 2 hours versus 1 second. It clearly shows who's the winner. And by the way, when I say solution cycle time here, this is the time from when the security companies get the sample from the time a solution is provided to the enterprise. Now, when I say solution here, it's not really a solution. Usually, it's just a detection mechanism. Because solving this kind of malware, these kinds of malware, it's actually really challenging because they're so sophisticated enough that every time they infect a system, removing them from the system sometimes result in the system being destroyed itself. That's how complicated some of this malware are today. And when it comes to AV evasion techniques, they're effectively utilized by the attackers. Before, when you need to have a certain AV evasion technology available in your group of attackers, you need to have that skill within your team. But now, you don't need to have that. All you need to do is get the tool that has that capability. If you have the money, just get the tool, since everything now can be made into a tool. Just get the tool, and then you'll have access to that kind of AV evasion technology. So basically, if you have the funds, you could just buy the tool that you need, and then you'll have that technology in your team. And most of the signatures that are created today is 1:1 because really most of these tools, they confuse the hell out of researchers, and also with automated systems, and also with security products. So if you're not really familiar with the tools, the DIY kits and the different armoring tools, you'll end up classifying these malware samples as a totally different family, when in fact they're really not. And understanding the malware requires reversing and not just analysis. So there's this things like the schoolhouse is on fire, but then the bank is being robbed. Now, most malware, especially those that are used for targeted attacks, they would have very obvious behavior that's very easy to spot. But then, most of the time, those are just diversions. The real directive it has is going on somewhere in the background. And if you really want to find out more about the malware, especially if it's noteworthy or it's hot or it's very notorious when it comes to infecting Fortune 100 companies, then you really need to reverse the malware. This is why most attacks that made it to the media, sometimes it takes different security providers months to actually come up with a full report, because that's the actual time it took them to really understand what that malware is doing. Because I could just say here, reverse this and reverse that, but when in fact reversing takes a lot of time. Like for me, sometimes it takes me days, weeks, even months to reverse one malware sample. That's how sophisticated some malware samples are. But sometimes it's because of those different protective mechanisms that were applied to the malware that's actually taking too much time for a reverser such as myself to fully understand what the malware is doing, or to just go to the main malware code. All right, let's go to the demo. So this demo, I'm using Zeus to create a malware sample. So before the automation started, all of the configuration files of this Zeus version was already prepared. So here, just let it go, and then it would produce samples in an instant. Like for this one, as I was just talking, it already produced 2 samples. So leave it alone, come back, and then you'll have malware samples, lots of malware samples on your hand. If you have kids that play sports, just go out, watch your kid play baseball, play basketball, play football, or whatever. Come back, and you will have this a lot, or I would say thousands of malware samples available to you. Now, let's say you take one sample from this Zeus malware that was produced, and subject them into an armoring tool. So this next demo is we will be using SAW6. It's an armoring tool. So it doesn't use time as a seed, but it uses random bytes. So virtually, when you look at the number of bytes, virtually it could create billions, trillions of samples. So still, that's a lot of samples to process. And this one also has some anti-debugging techniques, or I would say evasion techniques that it builds into the malware. As claimed here, it has anti-Anubis, anti-Norman, anti-Sunbelt, which is now known as or GFI, and it also has anti-VMware. So as I was explaining all of those, it already created 6 unique malware samples, armored malware samples, based on one malware sample that was produced by the DIY kit. And then, as I said, you could even use an old malware sample to subject them to this to different arming tools, and you'll be able to create infinite unique malware sample based off of that one old malware sample. So let's put them together. So a typical malware automated system starts with a bare metal system. You have a virtualized machine that hosts the kit, and then another virtualized machine that holds the different armoring tools. You have a shared folder that has the samples produced by the kit, and you have an agent running in the bare metal system that monitors this folder. And if there's a sample there, it submits it to the VM with the armoring tools, and it spits out the result in another shared folder that has all the armored samples on it. And then this folder, the attacker just goes to this folder, collects all of the malware samples, the thousands and thousands of malware samples that was produced by his automated system, and he's happy. He can use it for whatever purpose he wants. He can sell it in the underground. He could just keep it for research purposes, or he could use it to do an attack campaign against a certain entity. So what are the key takeaways from this presentation? We need to understand the real story behind the numbers. So I think one thing that would really change the industry is that instead of actually presenting the number of unique malware seen, how about presenting the number of malware families that were discovered during that year, or that were making the rounds during that year? Because the thousands and thousands, even millions of samples, when you actually look at it, only a handful of kits are responsible for those number of malware samples. So it would be good to have, like, at the end of the year, these were the number of samples that were, we've seen 10 malware families actually doing the rounds. They're all armored, so you see different generations. So instead of seeing millions and millions and millions in terms of stats, all you see is like let's say 2013, we saw 10, 2014, we saw 15, and then 2015, we saw 5, because those 5 are the most effective ones, and most of the attackers were using those 5 malware families. And of course, what people would always ask, or people fail to say every time they present those kinds of figures, like the millions and millions of malware samples that are seen on a yearly basis, is what's giving the attackers that capability. And obviously, it's automation. And also, ask the right questions from your providers. It's very easy for your security providers to push the information to you, or do a demonstration, and most of those demonstrations are controlled. So what I would say is that before you meet with your security providers, write down all the questions, talk to experts within your company, talk to experts that you have in contact with, formulate your questions, so that when you meet with your security providers, you can ask them these questions. And then if they're going to do a demo, give them samples that you actually collect yourself. Some of them you probably would have collected from your contacts, some of them probably from your own enterprise, because those samples that you've collected, they actually represent real world malware that are seen in the wild. So it's always good to have those samples on hand, so that if somebody would conduct a demo, say, hey, how about we use my malware samples for your demo? So that's a good way to actually determine whether a security product is effective or not. And then, of course, a new solution is needed, signature-less detection. This is what I'm working on currently. And instead of reversing each sample, it's always wise to spend your time reversing the tools, the DIY kits and the different arming tools. Because then once you reverse those tools, it'll give you a better understanding of its creation. And the attackers actually understand this. That's why most of their tools, it also has evasion technologies. It has a lot of anti-debugger or anti-reversing or anti-disassembling protective mechanisms built in. So that's why it also takes time to reverse most of these tools. Now, if there's a leakage, which happens most of the time because competing kit makers would try to hack their competitor and then leak the source code, just like what happened to Zeus before and Carburp recently. Now, if you have access to that code, then it just made our life easier. But then again, it's also a double-edged sword, because if we get access to the codes, it means other attackers would get access to the code as well, and they can modify it to make it much more dangerous. So that's it. That's the presentation. I hope you guys take away something from it, and it was very useful. And again, if you have a budget for this year to buy a book, please buy a copy of my book, bit.ly MRB book. It takes you to Amazon. And send me a message in Twitter, or if you have any questions, you can ask me questions at Twitter. And you can also visit me in Facebook, like my page. It has updates and pictures. And if you want to connect to me in LinkedIn, please do so, linkedin.com, IN Elisan. Again, thank you for listening, and I would like to thank the organizers of BSides Rally for giving me the opportunity to present in the first ever BSides Rally this year. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
All right.